Tonight, we're here for one purpose. We're here to get you ready to advocate with us at the North Carolina General Assembly. Our state lawmakers are busy this year. They're introducing bills on everything from taxes to immigration to Medicaid expansion and voting. And this year's short session is a carryover from last year. So we've got a lot coming down the pipeline, and there are corporations, interest groups, lobbyists, everyone kind of down at the state legislature doing their own thing. And what the state needs is you, a people's lobby, ready to show up, ready to turn up, ready to turn out, and make sure your lawmakers are held accountable. In this training tonight, we'll introduce you on how the legislator works, some of the bills that are moving quickly through the People's House, through the Senate, and the General Assembly, and setting you up for any next steps that you need to join us in Raleigh next week when it begins and all throughout the summer. You'll learn how to talk to your lawmakers in your districts, and you'll be able to find out more activations that are coming in the coming weeks from our partners and our friends that are doing really great work too. Tonight, we've got an amazing panelist lineup. We've got some experts in the house, some amazing folks. Brian Kennedy, our senior policy analyst here at Democracy North Carolina, is going to help break down some issues. I'm your moderator for the evening. Sugalima Lynch is our Greater Triangle Regional Managing Organizer. So if you're in the Triangle, the Greater Triangle area, that's your regional managing organizer that you can get connected with. She's going to tell us some amazing things about the state legislature tonight. We have Tyler Day, a program manager from Common Cause North Carolina, an elections expert for sure, breaking down some bills for us. Dr. Jovita Lee Miller, our deputy director at NC Black Alliance, also an incredible legislative expert, and will help give us a good breakdown on who holds power in the Senate and in the House. And then Shruti Parikh from North Carolina Asian Americans Together, the Director of Political Engagement, also giving us the ins and outs of how the structure of the North Carolina General Assembly is kind of had and how bills go through committee. So give them a round of applause. We're so excited that you're here tonight. And before we get started, we're going to talk about a few group norms for tonight's call. We're here to educate, and we're also here to listen. So again, if you're just joining us, drop your name in the chat, the county you're from, and what brought you here tonight. Also, this is a nonpartisan space. It's a place for nonpartisan solutions to the challenges that we face. They want this to be a nonpartisan battle, but we know it's about right and wrong. This is about the people of North Carolina. We also are committed to centering racial justice and an intersectional movement. We know racist and oppressive policies caused many of the representation and resource inequities in this state over the past few decades. And it's only this acknowledgement and a fusion movement that will help us map a future we can certainly believe in. We know this has been a long fight. Folks are exhausted. There's a lot of things coming at us at the federal level, internationally, and here at home in North Carolina. And there's a lot of you that have been doing good things among that. You've been leading voter registration efforts. You've been monitoring your local county board of elections, holding your local elected officials accountable, educating your neighbors about what's on the ballot. Like, y'all have been doing such great work. And that's what brings us hope and joy as we commit to this ongoing fight to protect our democracy and ensure more people can vote in the elections ahead. Now it's time to work the polls. That one was for all my Bravo heads in the chat. We're going to have a poll. If you're willing, our tech person, our amazing Alicia Harding here at Democracy NZ, is going to set up a poll for us. And can you tell us, have you ever been to the North Carolina General Assembly? And have you ever spoken to a local or state lawmaker before? We're going to leave this up for a little bit so we can hear who kind of has been to the General Assembly, who has talked to a lawmaker, get a good feel and vibe for who is here with us tonight. All right, so we've got some folks, yeses, okay, and a few no's, wonderful. We've got a diverse crew here tonight. Got more yeses, I've talked to my state lawmaker, yeses, I've talked to my local lawmakers both, and a few no's. That's totally okay. That's why we're so happy you're here tonight. No's, no, yes, okay, amazing, because if you've ever been there, it can change. Things move quickly there. And if you've never been there, now's a good time to get up to speed before the short session starts next week. And you can lean on your friends, you can lean on your community members to help you, learn the ins and outs, and you can share that back to your community tonight. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of why we're here. We're good, before we take a deep dive into the state legislature and the General Assembly and how it works, we want to set the stage by first talking about the roles of the three branches of North Carolina's government. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jovita Lee Miller to give us a little more info. Jovita?
Absolutely. Thank you, Giselle, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, for joining us, and being interested in engaging around this topic. And so, a little bit about the foundation of our government. And so, North Carolina's government, like the federal government, is split into three branches. The executive branch is led by our governor, who signs laws into effect, runs state agencies, and is joined by other elected officials like the Attorney General and the State Treasurer. The legislative branch, the General Assembly, they make the laws and they control the state budget, which we still do not have, by the way. The judicial branch interprets the laws through a layered court system. So we have our local district courts all the way up to our state Supreme Court. Each branch is meant to keep an eye on the other. So no branch gets too powerful. So let's talk about the governor specifically. The governor is elected to a 4-year term with a 2-term limit and tasked with carrying out the state laws of North Carolina. North Carolina was the last state to give the governor veto power. Appointments, the governor is currently responsible for over 2,400 appointments to over 350 boards and commissions, like the North Carolina Utilities Commission, which implements policy around things like your light or your gas bill, the State Board of Education, and judicial positions if there's an opening. We also have our state agencies that the governor oversees, like the Department of Public Safety, and he can give pardons to incarcerated people. The legislature, the governor plays a big role within that as far as negotiating the state budget and is subject to checks from the legislative branch. For example, some of his appointments must be approved by the legislature. The governor can also call a special session of the legislature in states of emergency. Veto power and overrides. The governor can veto, which essentially means block, bills passed by the legislature. The governor can also decide to not sign nor veto legislation and allow it to just organically become law 10 days after it is presented to him, and longer if the legislature is not in session. The governor cannot veto redistricting. So, as folks saw back in October, we had brand new congressional maps. There was unfortunately nothing he could do about that with the veto power that he currently has. Also, state or federal constitutional amendments or local bills affecting counties and cities. I also want to note in the past 7 years, there have been a number of attempts by our legislature to continue to limit the governor's power, such as restricting his ability to issue executive orders. And a prime example of that was in 2016, former governor Pat McCrory signed a law limiting incoming governor Roy Cooper his ability to appoint the State Board of Elections, which was a clear backlash to the change in party control of the governorship. That move was later reversed by the courts. And speaking of the courts play a huge role in deciding the fate of laws and policies in North Carolina. So, Brian, would you be willing to give us a brief overview of the purpose of the judiciary?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Brian Kennedy, and thank you so much for spending your time here with us. This is something, we all deeply care about, and to be amongst other folk who also deeply care about these issues. So a little bit about the courts. Our judicial branch interprets the state laws, and they make decisions about those laws. And they also decide what happens to individuals or to parties or groups that break those laws. In North Carolina, we have state courts, which include everything from the district and superior courts all the way up to the Court of Appeals and the state Supreme Court. Federal courts can also play a role in the state when issues are raised that impact federal law or the U.S. Constitution, and so we'll oftentimes see federal courts also playing a role in our legislative policies. But what's important to know is that the courts can serve as a crucial check. As Dr. Lee noted, checks and balances is the core to our system. And so when other branches of government violate the rights of North Carolinians, it's up to the judicial branch to correct those wrongs. So recently, we've had three major rulings that kind of just highlight how important and the potential impact of the state Supreme Court. First, in Democracy NC versus Hirsch, very recently, a judge found that the harmful 2023 legislative bill, Senate Bill 747, they found the bill constitutional. And this was after our friends at the Southern Coalition for Social Justice represented a number of organizations in the electoral space, challenging the bill on the grounds that it violated obstacles, or created voting obstacles for young voters, voters of colors, elderly voters, young and low-income voters. Next, in the North Carolina NAACP versus Berger, the court ruled in favor of voter ID. And this is after our partners at Fort Justice represented the NAACP in a lawsuit challenging Senate Bill 824, also as being unconstitutional and on the grounds that it was violating the Voting Rights Act as well as the 14th and the 15th Amendment, saying that voter ID was discriminatory and was designed to dilute the power of Black and brown voters. And then even more recently, and I'm sure many of you all have heard about the Leandro case, but very recently, the state overturned the last Leandro decision, the 2022 decision, that would have allowed the transfer of hundreds of millions of tax to fund public schools. And this is a case which goes all the way back to 1994 and really is about the interpretation of the North Carolina Constitution, which demands that the state fund public education. So the state Supreme Court ruled that, you know, they ruled that state courts don't have the authority to order spending. So these courts, you know, they may not be the most popular and get the most attention, but they have the power to impact every aspect of government and life here in North Carolina. And so ultimately, but there's ultimately there's three branches, and this is just one of them that's part of the balance. And so the Supreme Court, the court systems also work with the legislator. And so, Shirley, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to tell us a little bit about the General Assembly and how they interact with the other branches of government.
Of course. Thank you, Brian. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shruti Parikh, and it's exciting to see so many folks on this call caring about these issues as much as we do. First, it's important to understand how our state legislature is structured. We have two chambers, the House of Representatives with 120 members and the Senate with 50. Members of both chambers serve 2-year terms, and there are no term limits. That means the same people can hold power for a long time, and that means that relationships, access, and accountability really matter. At the core, their job is pretty straightforward. They make our laws and decide how our state budget is spent, and those decisions shape our daily lives, from our schools to healthcare to the resources that our communities rely on. The legislature meets in 2 types of sessions. In odd-numbered years, there's a long session where a major priority is passing a full budget, which we still don't have one. In even number years, like this one, we have a short session, which typically starts in May. In theory, the short session is meant for adjusting the budget, but in practice, lawmakers can and do take up major policy changes. And it's worth noting, North Carolina actually has some of the longest legislative sessions in the country. A lot of the real work happens in committee meetings. For example, the House Committee for K-12 Education. These are smaller groups where bills are debated, amended, and sometimes quietly stopped. That's when That's often where decisions are shaped before they ever reach a full vote. Leadership in the House and the Senate also play a big role. The Speaker of the House, currently Dustin Hall, and the Senate President pro tem, Phil Berger, are chosen by the majority party and hold significant power. They set the agenda for their chambers, control the calendar, decide what gets heard, and appoint committee chairs. The President of the Senate is the Lieutenant Governor, currently Rachel Hunt, and will only vote to break a tie. So when we think about advocacy, it's not just about what gets voted on. It's about who has power, how decisions are made, and where we can show up to make sure our communities are part of the process. And with that, Tyler, given the enormous power the legislature holds, how does a bill actually become law?
That's a fantastic question, Shruti. So let's talk about it. Every bill starts off as an idea, and this can come from any North Carolinian, an organized group of people, or a legislator advocating for change on behalf of their constituents. In order for a bill to be introduced, it must be sponsored by a legislator in the House or the Senate. Ideally, a bill is strongest when both a senator and a representative sponsor the legislation. And many times, advocacy is needed to ensure a bill survives. Once lawmakers have an idea in mind, they will work with staff to write the bill and ensure it complies with current law. The bill is then introduced in either the House or the Senate for a first reading. Every bill will undergo a first reading. The Speaker of the House or the Senate President pro tempore will then assign a bill to a committee. Committees, which are smaller groups of lawmakers focused on specific topics. This can range from education to elections and so forth. Committees can determine the success of a bill. And while as many as 2,000 bills may be introduced in a legislative session, only a third make it to a vote by the whole body, and that's a floor vote. The committee chairperson may decide not to hear a bill, usually at the direction of the leader of their chamber, thus preventing the bill from moving forward. Committee meetings are where legislators are more likely to amend the bill to provide recommendations to the legislative body. It's also time for you to give in your input on a bill, since public comment is often permitted during committee meetings. We'll get more into how to provide public comment later on. But I also want to mention that if a committee decides to move a bill forward, there are multiple paths then that the bill can take. So the bill may go to another committee to be approved, but bills ultimately go through the Chamber's Rules Committee, and that Rules Committee may take up the bill, or or I should say, it may not take up the bill. It may decide that it doesn't want to move the bill forward, or it may move the bill forward to the full body of the House or Senate for a second reading. And this power makes the Rules Committee very powerful. If the bill passes with a majority vote in the House or Senate on the floor, then it needs to go to the opposite chamber, and the process repeats. The bill must pass both chambers in identical form. If both chambers do not agree to pass a bill as it's written, then a bill can go to a conference committee, where members of both chambers are on the committee, and they will discuss changes to ensure that both chambers are pleased with the bill. They'll then move it forward and send it back to both chambers for approval. And if the bill passes both chambers with a majority vote, finally, it will then go to the governor, who can veto the bill, sign it into law, or do neither. And if the governor does not take any action within 10 days of receiving the bill becomes law. And as Shavita mentioned before, some bills are not subject to action by the governor. The governor can't veto redistricting bills, constitutional amendments, or local bills. If the governor does veto a bill, the legislature has a chance to override the bill, and they would need a three-fifths majority in both chambers, the House and the Senate, to override the governor's veto, and that would allow the bill to go into effect. The legislature does have to give at least 24 hours notice to hold a veto override. I know that's a lot of information. I'm going to turn it back to Joselle.
Thanks so much, Tyler. Appreciate that overview. That was a lot of information. Like it is not easy necessarily to follow all of this when it goes from one committee and then the other, and then it goes to a Senate and to a floor vote and then a conference committee. It can be confusing, but that's okay. We're going to send all this information to you. You'll be able to review it again. You'll be able to use the slide deck and go back and see what we were talking about. And we're going to take another poll to see what you learned right now. So Alicia, our amazing tech person, can you launch the poll? And we're going to test your knowledge about what you just heard and rank in the order how a bill starts, how a bill passes, and becomes law. So I'll give y'all a few seconds to work the polls. And it's okay if you don't get it right. It took me a few years and I still have questions. I'm like texting Jovita. I'm like, what is happening? Texting other folks to get it right. Okay, we got some answers coming in. Amazing. All right. Yes, yes, we've got a bill is heard in committee. Yes, or an idea is formed. Okay. I give it about 5 more seconds and then we'll see y'all's results.
I'm going to take a moment to do the poll in Spanish as well for our Spanish speakers to answer. So I'll give another 10 seconds for that poll.
Thank you, Alicia. Gracias. All right, everyone. Yes, wonderful. We can share the results. All right. So yes, the order is a bill, an idea is formed on how to amend or create a law. It is heard in committee and then sent to the full chamber. Passes, both chambers didn't agree on bill, so it went to conference committee. Then it finally went back and passed both chambers, and then it was sent to the governor. So yay, good job, y'all. Lots of y'all got that right. But now that we know about how a bill becomes law, we're going to talk about who's actually making those laws and who holds power at the North Carolina General Assembly. So Davida, can you give us a breakdown on how the state legislator is supposed to represent you, the people?
Absolutely. And so, talking a little bit about representation in the legislature. And so, in 2026 midterm elections, all the 170 seats in the General Assembly are up for re-election, as they are every 2 years. So, this is a really big election year. As shown earlier, the leader of the House is Speaker Destin Hall, a Republican representing portions of Caldwell and Watauga counties. The House of Representatives is composed of 70 Republicans and 49 Democrats, with one current vacancy. The majority party is one vote shy of a super majority And that means they only need one Democratic vote to override the governor's veto. The Senate currently is led by Senator Phil Berger, a Republican representing Rockingham County and portions of Guilford County, and he has held this position since 2011. Mind you, we're in 2026. The Senate is composed of 30 Republicans and 20 Democrats. Republicans have enough members for a supermajority in the Senate, but would need help from the House to override a veto from the governor. So let's take a look at a full breakdown of the North Carolina House. This chart shows every North Carolina House seat. Each seat is grouped based upon that seat's political leanings. The political demographics are calculated from an analysis by the Civitas Partisan Index. There are a total of 43 safe or likely Democratic seats and 51 safe or likely Republican seats. Lean seats and toss-up seats are the most competitive seats. Notice there are fewer of them, only totaling 26. Each seat on this graph is color-coded, indicating which party won that seat in the 2024 general elections. As you can see, Republicans hold all the safe, likely, and lean seats, which were favored for them. They also won 5 out of 7 toss-up seats. Democrats won all the seats projected as safe, likely, or lean for them. You might also notice a few lame ducks. And essentially, a lame duck is an elected official who's still in office, but already knows they won't be returning. In this case, because they lost their primary election, or they may be retiring. They retain their seat and voting privileges until their term fully ends, but with limited influence since their departure is all but certain. So some examples of North Carolina House lame ducks. We have Representative Pirtle in Rockingham County. We have Representative Kidwell in Beaufort, Dare, Hyde, and Pamlico County. We have Representative Hastings in Cleveland and Gaston County. We have Representative Pless in Haywood and Madison County. We have Representative Stevens in Surrey and Wilkes County. Representative Warren in Rowan. Representative Brody in Anson and Union. Representative Sauls in Lee and Moore, Representative Brisson in Bladen and Sampson counties, Representative Ross in Alamance, Representative Ted Davis, New Hanover, and Representative Winslow, Franklin and Vance. And on the Democratic side, we have Representative Majid in Mecklenburg, Representative Cunningham in Mecklenburg, Representative Willingham, who is in the eastern region of our state, and Representative Cone in Granville and Vance. And so let's take a look at the breakdown of the North Carolina Senate. The Senate is composed of 30 Republicans and 19 Democrats with one vacancy as of literally this month. Republicans and Democrats in the Senate hold all the safe, likely, or lean seats favored for them. Out of the Senate's 50 seats, only 7 of them are actually competitive. Our North Carolina Senate lame ducks include Senator Phil Berger, who we just spoke a lot about, Rockingham and Guilford, Senator Meismer in Cabarrus, and Senator Haynig in Bertie, Camden, Currituck, Dare, Gates, Hertford, Northampton, Pasquotank, Perquimans, and Tyrell. So quite the lineup of counties under that specific senator. And also, representation matters. As we know, the state of North Carolina is made up by many different cultures, races, ethnicities, genders, all the things. And so we want to make sure, as we're looking at the makeup of the legislature, let's identify if it actually represents the state in which we reside. And so currently, there are 36 women in the state house. That means women hold about 30% of the possible North Carolina House seats. Of those women, 27 are Democrats and 9 are Republicans. The Senate has 16 women, which is about 32% of the Senate, and 12 are Democrats and 4 are Republicans. If we look into the racial breakdown, For the House, there are 22 Black representatives. All of them are Democrat. There's one Indigenous American Republican and two Asian Americans, both Democrat. And then two Latine, one Republican, one Democrat. And in our Senate, 10 Black senators, all Democrat. And then two Indian Americans, both Democrat. Now, you may be thinking the legislature doesn't really represent me or the state of North Carolina at large. And there may be a very important reason that this is a true fact. So we're going to take a pause here. In the chat, I would love for you all to take a guess at how much your lawmakers make per year. And any ideas, any guesses are fine. So we're going to take a second. If you could drop in the chat so we can see how much do you believe your lawmaker makes per year. 16,000, I'm seeing 50,000, I'm seeing 40,000, 65,000, 100,000, 20,000, 14,000, all good guesses in the chat. And so a lot of folks don't actually realize, but in North Carolina, legislators make a base salary of less than $14,000, plus a daily stipend of $104. So on average, a lawmaker can make anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000 a year in totality. They are among the lowest paid in the United States. And so thinking about where we are, especially now with the current economy, this creates a lot of barriers for people who may be interested in being a lawmaker, may have interest in running. Money matters. And so because of this fact, a lot of our legislators have to work a part-time job or even a full-time job on the side of being a legislator, just trying to make up for the gap that they would have if they were only solely reliant on their current salary. And they're doing that while trying to ensure that they are upholding their duties in office. As you can imagine, this means that for many everyday North Carolinians, even thinking about running for office feels like an unachievable goal. The most common occupation in the General Assembly continues to be attorneys, followed by jobs in real estate and business. However, there are still lawmakers that serve in ministry, farming, education, and some are already retired. And so if we want to think about looking up our representative, if I want to find my specific representative, how could I potentially do that? And so I'm going to pass it to Sugalima to explain how you actually find your specific legislator.
Thanks so much for that information, Dr. Jovita Lee. It's pretty incredible how little our representatives make. Like I said, that's a great question, and it's actually really simple. You can use the NC General Assembly Find Your Legislators tool. I will put that in the chat for you to play around with. All you need is your home address. You type it in, and it will pull up your state House representative and your state senator right away. And even if you think you know who represents you, it's worth double checking because with redistricting and turnover, it may have changed. You can also search by district, county, or even your voter registration. But honestly, your address is the quickest way. Once you find your legislators, you can click on their names to get their contact information and learn more about their work. So now that you have an idea of how to find your legislators, let's talk about what you can expect when going to the General Assembly and who you might actually meet when you visit a legislator's office. I'm curious in the chat, real quick, if you've been inside. I think we addressed it a little bit, but I'm curious if you've actually been inside of the General Assembly. I'm just going to keep going though. So moving on to once you actually get there, what should you expect? I will also say there's the Q&A for if you want to put it in there, and we'll be able to find your questions a lot faster. When you're entering the General Assembly, you'll be asked to go through security. And there are two buildings where members of the public can observe the legislative process. Both buildings hold offices for both chambers, staff, and committee meetings. The legislative building holds the chambers where the House and the Senate actually meet. The legislative building contains not only the Senate and the House chambers, but also committee rooms and offices for members of their staff. Members of the public are allowed to watch House and Senate floor debates in a gallery on the third floor. The legislative office building houses member offices as well as committee rooms. When observing a committee hearing, you may sign up to provide public testimony most times. So, who is in the legislator's office? What is the legislative assistant and what do they do? When you're visiting your lawmaker, you may meet with their legislative staff. Each legislator has a legislative assistant that may have other staff if they chair an important committee or are in leadership. A legislative assistant is responsible for managing the legislator's calendar among other duties or interns. So don't be discouraged if you only get to speak with the legislative staff. Legislative assistants can have a great deal of influence in what bills the legislator prioritizes. So it's always worth sharing your thoughts on an issue with them. When introducing yourself, remember to share whether or not you're a constituent of the legislator. In some ways, legislative assistants are the most powerful people in the building, and they can determine if you get to meet with the legislator. So being nice to the legislative assistant can pay off. And it's also worth noting that Raleigh is not the only place to meet your legislators. Every weekend, legislators return to their districts and often meet their constituents at that time. You can ask to meet with them in your districts. So I'm finished here and I'm going to pass it along to Tyler.
All right. So we're going to talk about some of the bills that we're anticipating this year, some bills that were introduced during the last session, and then some that we may see come up throughout this short session. So first, we'll talk about House Bill 958. This is an election bill. And you can see here there are good and bad components to it. One of the good things that it does is it extends the time that county boards of elections have to count provisional ballots. This is something that was restricted in Senate Bill 382 in 2024. And this bill would extend that time to ultimately 7 days, 5 business days. That's less than the amount that the counties had previously, but more than what they have now. It also would extend the time that voters have to cure absentee ballots. That was something that was also restricted in Senate Bill 382. Voters previously had 9 days to do so they now have 2.5 days, and this would extend it up to 7 days. And you can see some of the other provisions there, banning foreign nationals' money in elections, and clarifying that a driver's license is a part of a 2-year grace period if it's expired. Currently, your license can't be more than 1 year expired if you are under 65. Some of the bad things here, I think two of the worst things on this list are banning ranked choice voting statewide, which I know some municipalities have discussed a desire to possibly want to look into as an alternative system for voting. This would eliminate that possibility. It would also require all voters to provide their full Social Security number on voter registration applications. And you can certainly see that this could be a privacy concern for people to be putting that information. I personally would not want to put my Social Security number on a voter registration application. And then I know we have other bills to get to. I don't want to go through each of these points, but um, there are several other restrictions here providing the state board with exempt partisan appointees, restricting the types of photo IDs that military and overseas voters can use. That's what UOCAVA voters stands for. It's uh, voters in the military and overseas who are citizens. Um, I also just highlight it requires voters who vote before election day, if they pass away before 6:30 a.m. on election day, that vote would be required to be thrown out. There's currently some ambiguity around that, and so this uh, seeks to provide more clarity. And then also it allows the state board to hire private counsel and make those communications private records, not accessible to the public. So a lot there with House Bill 958. Um, we can go on to the next bill, House Bill 127. This was also introduced in the last session, and uh, it's in committee. It did not make it beyond committee. Hopefully, it won't go any further. But this bill essentially would eliminate the ability for third-party groups to conduct voter registration drives. That's essentially what it does. Um, and so again, that would be really, really, I think, very detrimental um, if it were to go forward. Uh, go on to the next bill, House Bill 171. And this bill would prohibit state and local governments from implementing, maintaining, or even promoting workplace diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, policies, or initiatives. Um, this bill was vetoed by the governor last year, but we are concerned that it may come up again this year. And, as we talked about before, the legislature does have the power to override the governor's vetoes if they do get enough votes. And certainly, uh, diversity, equity, inclusion has been a hot topic. And, uh, you know, I, I don't see why people would not be in favor of promoting these things, but this certainly could come up again, and we'll be watching to see what happens. Then we have Senate Bill 58, and this bill would unconstitutionally prohibit the Attorney General from taking legal action against any statute passed by the General Assembly or any executive order issued by the president. And so this bill is really uh, focused on limiting the power of the Attorney General. Recently, I think this is very relevant given the fact that the Attorney General just recently sued over the president's recent executive order regarding mail-in voting. And so this would not allow the Attorney General to take that sort of action. Then we have Senate Bill 50, Freedom to Carry in C. This bill would legalize permitless concealed carry, also known as constitutional carry, in North Carolina. It would permit U.S. citizens who are over the age of 18 and who are eligible to own, possess, or receive a firearm under applicable law to carry concealed handguns without a permit or training. This bill was another bill that was vetoed by the governor previously. It was overridden by the Senate, but not in the House. And so, again, this bill could very well come up, and we'll be watching to see what happens if it does in the House. And we have Senate Bill 153, the North Carolina Border Protection Act. So this bill would require would require several agencies, North Carolina state agencies, the Department of Public Safety, Department of Adult Correction, State Highway Patrol, the State Bureau of Investigation, to enter into an agreement with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And essentially, this would make it easier for the federal government to enact its immigration policies. And it would also require that Health and Human Services, local housing authorities, and other state agencies take additional steps to ensure that undocumented people are not benefiting from public benefits beyond any extent required by federal law. The bill would waive certain aspects of governmental immunity for local governments that fail to comply with anti-sanctuary ordinances, and it would prohibit University of North Carolina schools from adopting any type of sanctuary policies or procedures, and from preventing law enforcement officials from gathering information on the citizenship status of an individual and sharing that information with federal law enforcement agencies. So it's another bill that we are watching. That bill was also vetoed, overridden by the Senate. And again, it is possible that the House could take that up. Okay. So safeguarding fair elections. So this is a pro-voter bill that has good language in it that would strengthen election administration, safeguards, and reinforce voter protections. And there are several things that it would do. It would establish a 250-foot buffer prohibiting the presence of Immigration Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, or any other law enforcement near voting locations, absent a specific election-related public safety need. We know that the presence of law enforcement at polling locations can be intimidating to voters. And so having this buffer would help prevent that. It would define voter intimidation and create new criminal penalties for voter intimidation and deception. And there are several provisions here that are being considered for this bill under voter intimidation. It would establish a community-led voter intimidation advisory committee within the State Board of Elections, and strengthen protections for election administrators and poll workers against threats, intimidation, or harassment. We have seen that being more and more of a concern in recent years, given the heightened level of scrutiny that election administrators are under. So that's definitely something that I think is important. It would require direct voter notification of challenges to their eligibility to vote, to ensure that that voters are aware of those challenges and can act accordingly if they need to. It would also establish guardrails governing the disclosure of sensitive voter data and address disruptions during the canvass and certification process. One of the things that I mentioned again early on with House Bill 958 is addressed here although it would go further. So it would return the provisional ballot counting deadline to what it was before, which was the day of canvass, 10 days after Election Day, giving the county boards of elections time to review provisional ballots. And again, these are ballots for voters for whom that there is a question regarding their eligibility. And it's really important, I think, that the counties have the time to do that research. It's better to be accurate than to be fast. So that would restore that period for the counties, and it would also restore the period for voters to cure their provisional or absentee ballots to uh, 9 days after Election Day, up through the day before canvass. Um, and so that's really, really huge, I think. And I should note, um, we are expecting that there will probably be more provisional ballots, given the fact that there are more um, possibilities for these types of ballots, whether it's from voter ID or from the State Board of Elections registration repair project. Um, it's important that voters, if there are any issues, that they have time to correct those issues, because we want to ensure that all eligible voters are able to cast a ballot, and we don't want ballots to be not counted because of technicalities. A person just didn't have time to get back to the county board of elections office um, to provide their photo ID, for example. Um, and it would also restore the absentee ballot request deadline to the Tuesday before Election Day. That was something else in Senate Bill 382 that was cut back. It reduced the amount of time that voters have to request an absentee ballot by a week. Um, and uh, this would restore that, giving voters an additional week to do that. So a lot of things in that bill, a lot of bills that I know we have gone over. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Joselle.
Thank you so much, Tyler. Really appreciate that. We did cover a lot of bills tonight. So don't worry if you didn't catch them all, because we're going to send you the recording. We're going to send you the slides. We're going to send you resources on this. Also, some good conversation has been going on in the chat, so be sure to check that out. We've been trying to answer your questions live. One thing that I realized as somebody who helped make the slide deck tonight, we forgot to talk about documentary proof of citizenship. Who has heard of the SAVE Act? Put it in the chat if you've heard about that. Yes, no, the SAVE Act, what it really means. Is it about voter ID? Is it more than just voter ID? Okay, yes, 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 yes. Okay, the SAVE Act. Okay, okay, everyone knows about the SAVE Act. Good. And it's more than just a voter ID bill, because there are people in power trying to sell it as just that. And it is much more than that. It is a documentary proof of citizenship bill. So you would have to provide a birth certificate or a passport, which is costly, which many folks don't have. They don't have it readily available. Who knows where their birth certificate is right now? I do not. You don't want to see anything outside this camera because it is a tornado of stuff. I don't know where my birth certificate is, and I don't have a passport. And so it would cost money to get those items. If you are a married person and you changed your name, or you've gone through a divorce and had to change it again, or you have a different situation where your name has been changed, it's going to impact you because your birth certificate is not going to match your passport potentially, or other forms of identification. And so this is under the mask of voter fraud, when we know that's a dog whistle and the use of propaganda to pit people against one another and divide us. It's essentially a poll tax. Yes, Tyler. Yes, Dr. Lee Miller. These are ways to disenfranchise voters, to bring back old tactics like the poll tax, like Jim Crow 2.0. And we are going to monitor if something like that shows up here in North Carolina, because they don't necessarily have the support to pass it at the congressional level. Tom Tillis himself has even said that he's not in support of the SAVE Act. But that doesn't mean state legislators here and those that hold power won't try to do something that's North Carolina specific. So we'll keep you posted on documentary proof of citizenship. We'll be sure to include that as part of our resource package that y'all will receive after this as well. But now it is 7 o'clock, right on time. Perfect. We have plenty of time for Q&A. So what is on your mind? Please use the raise hand function, and we have plenty of time for you to come off of mute, and one of our lovely panelists will be able to answer your questions. You can either drop in the chat, use the raise hand function, or just come off mute. And no worries if you've got lots of information flowing in your brain right now because you just learned so much. You intook a good amount of information about how a bill becomes a law, who holds power, how power is shared, how you can show up at the General Assembly, and the bills that our teams are tracking, the good bills that we're working with legislators to be filed right now. I actually was on a call earlier today, and I know folks in the education space are trying to put out a pro-education bill to protect our children in public schools. And so there's lots of good work happening across North Carolina, and particularly locally in your county, in your town hall, at your school board meeting. Let's see. Yeah, let me see. I've got some. What are we supposed to do besides just watch these bills? Is there something physical or more tangible to do? Any one of our panelists?
I can jump in, allow others as well if anyone else has anything to add. But, I would encourage you to, we talked about the Find Your Legislators feature to use that, find your legislator. And, if you have opinions about these bills, which I'm, looking through the chat, I think many people do. Then this is you want to make sure that you're expressing that to your representatives. Uh, and as we mentioned before, many of them, the bills that we talked about, we expect could come up in this short session, which begins on April 21st, less than a week from today. So, yeah, definitely contact your legislators. Let them know that what your priorities are, what you care about, and how you feel about this legislation.
Yeah, I would also add, if I may, another thing that I would name is like really focusing in on in-district activities and accountability activities as well. We've worked with several communities within our organization. All of us in this coalition have worked with communities to host accountability and in-district meetings or engagement points to where there were tangible results around either a bill or the elected themselves. And so I think, really focusing in on like that community engagement, making sure folks understand this legislation, because all of you all joined us tonight and we are so grateful. But there are so many folks that we're still going out in the community and we may say 171 and they have no idea what we're talking about. So we need more mouthpieces. We need more folks that are willing to have the conversations around these bills and really helping your neighbor understand the long-term impact around legislation as well. So in addition to having the conversation with the elected at the building, I would also encourage you to make these community education moments also.
Yeah, and I'll just add one last thing if that's okay. I think that I read a couple of comments that, that folks have called every day and they get these generic statements back. But don't forget that our legislators have to keep track of who's calling, and pressure does work. We've seen it. We've seen it work. We've seen bad bills we've seen harm lessened on bad bills. We've seen bad bills go away because people called and spoke up. So the power of the people, the power of us coming together to speak together is really important, and we need to keep doing that.
That's really powerful. Thank you all, and thank you, Shruti. I want to actually put this question back to you. Some folks have asked, what can folks do if they expect, it's not necessarily state legislator related, but if they see additional security or ICE at the polls, what does that look like for election protection for immigrant communities?
Yeah, so we've got a great coalition of partners that are working together to ensure safety at the polls. If you do see ICE at a poll, don't engage. You can pull out your camera and videotape them and call the Democracy NC Voter Protection Hotline. And Giselle, can you lift that up if you don't mind in the chat? I think it's 888 our vote. And you can definitely call the hotline. Let us know that you've seen this this presence at the polls, and we have community partners and other organizations ready to protect people at the polls. And so that's the best thing to do is don't engage, call the hotline, and get your phone out and just videotape from a safe distance. Anything else anyone else wants to add to that?
I would add, if people are, also similarly not legislative related, but if folk are looking for additional opportunities to engage and to be a part of it, you can also be a part of, on the receiving end of that hotline as well. So there's volunteer opportunities. If you're an attorney, or maybe you're a law student, you can sign up to help man that hotline, or to answer those questions. And there's lots of other volunteer opportunities that I'm sure will be shared at the end of the presentation. So we need folk to, not only spread information, but to also, give their time to help spreading correct information and combating confusion information.
Absolutely. I would definitely agree with that. Like, we all of the organizations represented here have election protection programs. And so we need all of the help that we can get, as many volunteers that we can get. Also, I wanted to make I made a note in the chat, but just to say aloud, like, the hotline also connects to actual trained attorneys as well. And so, like, we have a network of attorneys with our organization called Black Legal Network, Fort Justice, Southern Coalition for Social Justice, all have trained attorneys that can literally respond to these incidents in real time. And so that's why we emphasize, please call the hotline, because that is data we need when we're talking to our attorney general and other elected officials who can actually talk to other attorney generals across different states and compare notes. All of that data is critical. And so please don't hesitate to call the hotline, even if you need to call on behalf of a voter who may not feel comfortable.
And one last thing about the hotline, it is available in different languages, and we have Spanish speaking volunteers, and also different Asian languages as well.
Love it. That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not just at the state legislature where advocacy happens. It happens at the polling place. It happens at church. It happens in your community center. Like, advocacy can happen everywhere. We do have another question that somebody asked. What if there's an issue that someone cares about, but it's not being addressed at the state legislature? How can folks bring those ideas or like that core issue topic to somebody who can then make stuff happen?
Tyler, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to take it on?
I'll let you start, and I can add anything later.
Okay. One of the best things that we all can do is develop relationships with our legislators. They're ready and wanting to hear from us on issues that we're seeing in our community. They want us to uplift anything that we're seeing or that we're passionate about, so they can help us find solutions to it. And so I would say the first step is to develop those relationships. Keep them in your back pocket. And when you see an issue, definitely make an appointment, go see your legislator. You can even just drop by the General Assembly. You don't even need an appointment. They're happy to see people from their communities and their districts come and talk to them about real solutions that they can provide. Tyler, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's important that we remember we have the mindset that our legislators they work for us. We are the bosses. You know, so and when you say that you're saying things that aren't being addressed, well, it's up to us to to talk to our legislators and put pressure on them to address these issues. Yeah, nothing more to add.
Thank y'all. And also, Carrie, I see you in the chat. They're going to go to the state legislature for the first time. They're going to be visiting and speaking with the legislative caucus. What's one piece of advice, each panelist, I'm going to ask you, that you would give somebody uh, when they're heading there next week?
Just say, be completely authentic. They want to hear from their constituents. Um, if you have a story, if you have something that you want to share and feel comfortable sharing it with your legislator, feel free to do that as well. And also really connect the issue to real life experiences. Everyone has varying lived experiences, and those things often resonate even better than when we come in with kind of like hard facts and specific talking points. Really just tell your story, tell why you are, passionate or advocating around a specific issue, and just be authentically yourself and feel comfortable in the space, right? Like one of the things I tell folks all the time, especially when it's their first visit, that is the people's house. And so you're just coming home. And so feel comfortable in the hallways, feel comfortable visiting legislators because that is your space to do so. So that's something I would offer.
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll just go quickly. I will just add, I mean, I think that point about it's the people's house, like your tax dollars pay for that house. They keep the lights on there. So you really should walk, with your head held high and feel comfortable. And I think the other thing is, trusting your expertise, your lived experience is your expertise. And that is the most valuable thing that our elected officials can garner is the actual lived experiences of people who they're representing. So stand in your truth as an expert, and don't be dismayed or intimidated by large doors and big red carpets and all these other ornate things.
Yeah, and I'll add that something that I like to do before I go is I actually like to research the legislators that I'm going to speak to. Try to find out what they do in their professional lives, what colleges they've been to. Do they have children? These are other ways that we can connect with them, and build that relationship and make it easier to have conversations. And so not really legislative, it's not a legislative forward approach, but it's a relationship a forward approach, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, uh, be prepared. You might not have a lot of time, depending upon what's going on that day. Um, you might, if you're able to be flexible and allow for a good amount of time during the day, that would be good because sometimes legislators have to cancel meetings because other things come up. Um, so I would say just be prepared. You might not have a lot of time with legislators, and you might end up meeting with the legislative assistant if they aren't able to speak. If you aren't able to speak with the legislator themselves, and that's okay. They will relay that information back. Um, but and one other thing I'll say is don't be intimidated. Don't be afraid to, even if you don't necessarily have a scheduled appointment with a particular legislator. Sometimes you can walk in and a legislator may be able and willing to speak with you. But um, you know you don't know if you don't ask, essentially. So.
I would just add from personal experience, walking in, everybody's pretty kind and welcoming. So just walk on in there. And if you're not sure about talking to anybody, just sit and observe and watch and listen, and you'll be surprised. You'll get a lot out of just watching how legislators interact with each other, talk to each other. You'll be surprised, and that might encourage you to actually go out and talk to your legislator. I've found that when you're in the midst of it and you're watching how they're treating each other, you can clearly see the decorum. So I would encourage that, if nothing else, treat it like a little your own personal local telenovela. So.
Amazing, y'all. And my tidbit is go to the cafeteria. I love the cafeteria food. The banana pudding is like my favorite. Move over KW. This General Assembly cafeteria is the best. So thank you all. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Big shout out. Go ahead and give rounds of applause, hearts, loves in the chat for every panelist who spoke tonight. We did have a question. Oh, strawberry shortcake. Yes, very, very good. We did have a question about who's hosting an advocacy day, and I think there is one coming up. Shruti, I'm going to hand that over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, North Carolina Asian Americans Together is holding our 5th annual Advocacy Day on April 29th. I think we're going to post the registration link in the chat. We're very excited and happy to include anybody that would like to join us. And I'll pass it to Dr. Javita Lee Miller to talk about the North Carolina Black Alliance event.
Sure. So next week we have our annual North Carolina Black Summit, where we bring together advocates and elected leaders for the annual convening. This is actually our 20th anniversary of the North Carolina Black Summit, and actually the 25th year anniversary of our organization as a whole. So really big year, really big conversations to have, ranging from faith-based organizing and engagement to what are we doing about elections this year, all the way to environmental health concerns, AI, all the things. And so you can learn more about the convening at ncblacksummit.org.
And Taylor, I'm going to hand it to you to talk about the EV training.
Sure. So we hope to see you again 1 week from today at 6 o'clock next Wednesday, April 22nd. We at Common Cause, along with Democracy North Carolina, NC Black Alliance, and several other organizations, are hosting an elections funding and early voting advocacy training. And this is designed to empower you to be advocates at the local level. We've talked today about, um, how the sausage is made, essentially how these bills go through and become laws. But after that, it's up to agencies to administer those bills. And ultimately, when it comes to our elections, it is the boards of elections that are tasked with administering the law. And they need funding in order to do so. They need funding for their staff. They need funding for everything that they do. And it's the county commissioners that fund your county boards of elections. And early voting is, in my opinion, the best way to vote because you can vote anywhere in your county. And you can also register and vote on the same day if you need to. And so we're going to talk about how to advocate for early voting sites. Um, we do expect that there could be a lot of debate over early voting sites going into the general election. We did see sites that were not approved at some college campuses this past primary, and so we're going to talk about that and how to advocate for early voting.
Awesome. Thank y'all so much. And in the chat, yes, there is the kickoff on Tuesday of the short session starting. The North Carolina Educators Association is having a lobby day as well. And so there will be lots of buzz, lots of folks. Democracy NC is going to be at the state legislature also on Tuesday at 9 a.m. And so if you would like somebody to kind of help guide you, you've never been there before, or maybe, anxiety is real. I have it all the time. And you just need a buddy to be connected, to show up at the state legislature. Lots of us will be there throughout the coming weeks. will be there on Tuesday. Other folks will be there on Tuesday. Sign up for these wonderful events. Also, Javita put in the chat, May Day, there is a call for a statewide teacher strike because teachers aren't getting paid equitably. We are last in the entire country for public education funding. So be sure to follow all of our channels on social media, on Substack, online. Look out for our emails. We're going to send the resources, the slides, the video recordings all out to folks who registered, even if they didn't show up tonight. And we really appreciate everyone who took the time this evening to be with us today. So thank you so much.